Good afternoon, everyone. Today I am going to discuss about the utilitarianism. And in this chapter, we will know the foremost utilitarianist thinkers, who is Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, knowing their types of view on how utilitarianism exists. In this chapter, you should be able to first discuss the basic principles of utilitarianism ethics. And the second one is you should be able to distinguish between two utilitarianism models, the quantitative model of Jeremy Bentham and the qualitative model of John Mill. And the third one is you should able to apply utilitarianism in understanding and evaluating local and international scenarios. So now, before I will go through, I would like to ask you first, what is the word utilitarianism? And now, I will show you some pictures on how we will recognize the utilitarianism. So, as what I have been said a while ago, usa ni siya ka utilitarianism. So, you might think nga what unsa ni siya nga no, why still balance? And then here we can see nga happy isa ka buok, and then ang kadaghanan is sad. And then the next is kaniya siya sad. Ang isa ka buok nag-need, and then each one of them need og mo donate. So here we can see nga kinsa man ang deserve nga liksan, kanang isa or kanang lima ka buok. So mo ni siya ang utilitarianism pleasure. So as a teacher, we must know on how we will become a better and equip teacher soon. And then some examples jud ay nga ako jud ning ma-illustrate as a utilitarianism. When I was in high school level, I have seen a movie na, sorry kay nakalimot ko sa title, but ang maoy ni sink in sa ako ang mind nga usa siya ka example sa usa ka utilitarianism. It is because ang istorya manggod, ang iyang papa is maoy tig control sa train nga moagi sa karsada, and then kana bitong kung naay mulabang ang train, so i-close ang agianan sa mga car, and then kung mulabang pud ang mga car, i-up na pud ang agianan sa train. And then kanang siya mo itig control, but at that time is ang trabaho manggud, if i-control na manggud na ang outside, kay naabitay mo black nga saminto siya whole gyud nga dili na jud pwede nga naay taw nga moadto dito. But at that time is ang iyahang anak ni apas niya, and then gidalhan siya og pagkaon. And then pagsulod niya dito sa sulod na yun sa office, kay mo agi naman ang train, is padulong na niya kontrolon ang train, ang control para mo agi na ang train. But sad to say, pagdayon niya kwan, nakakita siya sa CCTV nga ang iyahang anak ni sunod. So nasugda naman niya, dili na pwede niyang bawion nga ikuan, kay kung bawion niya mamatay ang kadaghanan inside sa train. Ang tanan sulod sa train is mamatay. And then ang iyahang anak naa na po dito, dili na po pwedeng makagawas. So as a father, kinahanglan siya mo pili. It's either katubang na train or iyahang anak. Sakit kaayo bitaw sa ako ang na watch kay gi-choose niya ang kadaghanan kaysa isa. Kana bitawng yes, sakit jud kay to niya kay anak gud niya. Of course, siguro ambot lang kung kita naa sa sitwasyon unsa ang ato i-choose. Iyang gi-choose ang kadaghanan nga i-save ang katong train para walay madisgrasya. So iyang gi-allow, naghilak siya as in grabe niyang hilaka nga gibuhat niya kay ang iyang anak dili man naman ka out, nadakdakan na gidakdakan ka na bitang anak bitaw dagan nga kuan hantel nga napisa na ang anak kanang asin namatay gyud. Mao na siya nga ma-illustrate nako nga forsake o sa kadaghanan para sa kadaghanan gamay anang iyang gi-sacrifice ang isa rather than sa kadaghanan sa daghan. So ana siya isa ka example sa utilitarianism. So di ba? So now as what we have noticed di ba namantay duha ka. Kundili si Bitam mo na siya believe that nature had placed mankind under two sovereign masters, pleasures and pain. His Hindunic calculus. So, kani siya, usa ni siya ka Hinduism. So, mo ni ang beliefs ni, mo ni ang, Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism. Right actions result good or pleasure. Wrong actions result in pain or absence of pleasure. So, mo ni, in a way kuno nga, ma-maximize na to ang pleasures, of course, ma-minimize na to ang suffering. And then, like, yes, it is true. Inana bito kay, based sa ato ang experience, diba? So, kung wrong ang ato ang mga buhat, of course, mo result yun nga masakitan ta, nga ana siya, diba? So, the next is si John Stuart Mill in 1806 and 1873. So, becomes God's son. So, usa ni siya ka estudyante ni Bentham. So, Mill believed that quality was more important than quantity when it comes to pleasure. So, for example, the pleasures of the mind are far superior to the gratification of the body's desire. So this deals with the problem of sadistic torturers as their pleasure is a significantly lower kind. So, mo na siya ang iyang nga quality was more important than quantity. So, ano siya dili siya ganahan og grabe kadaghan. Ang importante ang quality. Like sa ato ba nga as a Christian, wala kanang moingon bitaw ta nga bahala gamay ta at least mga tinuod ta nga Christian. Dili kay ngun daghan tuod kay tas tanan pero outside day sa ato ang binuhatan is dili di ta ma-identify nga Christian ta. So okay sad ang iyahang kuan di ba? So by John Stuart Mill, ingon siya, a more sophisticated forms of utilitarianism concerned with quality of pleasures and quantity of people who enjoy it. So recognize higher and lower types of human pleasure. So, di ba? What is utilitarianism? As what we have talked while ago, murag dali ra nato ma-picture out ang words nga utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory which state that the best action is the one that maximizes utility. So utility means as the sum of all pleasures that result from an action. Of course, minimize the suffering of anyone involved in the action. So a version of consequentialism which state that the consequences of any action are the only standard of right and wrong. So considers the interests of all beings equally. So Utilitarianism, the moral philosophy that actions derive their moral quality from their usefulness as means to the end, to some end, especially as means productive of happiness or happiness. So, mo ni siya, ang utilitarianism is, it's more about nga, kung unsa, kumbaga, in Bisaya pa, kung unsa ang imuhang gitanom, mauman sad ang imong anihon. Like for example, nagkuan ka og nagbuhat ka og dili mayo. Okay, at the soon to be mag-ani jud ka sa dili nga sa dili maayo nga imuhang gitanom. So, utilitarianism applied to civic and politics, the greatest happiness of the greatest number should be sole and criteria of all publication action. So, mao na nga makita nato nga diri sa gi-impart bitaw siya sa usa ka kuan sa atoang sa kadaghanan, like aning politics, of course. Kung unsa ang ato ang nakuha sa politics tungod ana daghang mga corruption nya ni mo resulta man gyud ang corruption, di ba? Like ano ba, how ug unsa ang ato ang ug kumusta ang ato ang mga governor, no? Kumusta ang nana bitaw nga the greatest happiness of the greatest number should be solved in the criterion of all public action. So, utilitarianism believe that the purpose of morality is to make life better by increasing the amount of good things such as pleasure and happiness in the world and decreasing the amount of bad things such as pain and unhappiness. So, in a way jud kuno nga mo decrease. So, in a way pod nga on how we increase. So, if we want to be increase, so we have to do good things. Mao sa ingon. They reject moral codes or system that consists of commands or taboos that are based on customs, traditions, or orders given by leaders or supernatural beings. So, actually, based sa ako ang na-research bitaw, some people na ni criticize ani nga view. It is because these types of view is injustice daw. But so kung sa ako pud nga kuan is some people said nga nag-ingon sa dito sa base according sa ako nga research nga these types of view it is practical ways by individual, most especially sa ato ang moral, di ba? Impact siya sa ato ang moral bitaw by individual. So, the moral utilitarianism, the moral philosophy that actions derive their moral quality from their usefulness as means to some end, especially as means productive of happiness or unhappiness. So, applied to civics and politics, the greatest happiness of the greatest number should be sole end and the criterion of all public action. So, na sa utilitarianism, there is an act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. So, act utilitarianism is an utilitarian theory of ethics which state that a person's act is morally right if it is produces at least as much happiness as any other act that the person could perform at that time. So, mano siya ang act utilitarianism. Well, the rule utilitarianism is a form of utilitarianism that says an action is right as it conforms to a rule that leads to the greatest good, or that the righteous or wrongness of particular actions is a function of the correctness of the rule of which it is an instance. So here we can see nga act and rule utilitarianism. So for more bitaw nga Ato ang ma-learn. So, ang utilitarianism looks at the consequences of each individual act and calculates utility each time the act is performed. So, makita na to kung unsay kalahian sa act and rule. While the rule utilitarianism look at the consequence of having everyone follow a particular rule and calculates the overall utility of accepting or rejecting the rule. So, mo siya, for rule utilitarians is an easy choice. No one could approve a general rule that lets hospital kill patient their organs when they are going to die anyway. So the consequence of adopting a such general rule would be highly negative and would certainly undermine public trust in the medical establishment. So, as what I have nang give you some examples while ago sa katuang about sa hospital mo ni siya, no. So, for act utilitarians, the situations is more complex. If secrecy were guaranteed, the overall consequence might be such that in this particular instance, greater utility is produced by hastening the death of the homeless person and using his organs for the transplant. No, mo na siya ang kalahian sa rule utilitarians and act utilitarians. And hopefully, we will na understand na sila yun, no. So, utilitarianism, mo yun siya ang main point, the greatest happiness of the greatest number. So, the right thing to do is whatever would have the best overall consequences, which consequences matter. What's important is human welfare. We want people to be as well off as possible. So each person welfare is equally important. We are all valued and we are all unique and we are all special because God made us by his own image, and that is according from the scripture. So, and for more info nga ako'y for more info na video nga ako ang ipa-watch sa inyo ha, and for more understand, and hopefully you enjoy. God bless. Thank you for listening.
Utilitarianism is a theory in normative ethics holding that the best moral action is the one that maximizes utility. Utility is defined in various ways, but is usually related to the well-being of sentient entities. Originally, Jeremy Bentham, the founder of utilitarianism, defined utility as the aggregate pleasure after deducting suffering of all involved in any action. John Stuart Mill expanded this concept of utility to include not only the quantity, but quality of pleasure, while focusing on rules, instead of individual moral actions. Others have rejected that pleasure has positive value and have advocated negative utilitarianism, which defines utility only in terms of suffering. As opposed to this hedonistic view, some define utility with relation to preference satisfaction, whereas others believe that a range of values can be included in its definition. Utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism, which states that the consequences of any action are the only standard of right and wrong. This view can be contrasted or combined with virtue ethics, which holds virtue as a moral good. Some believe that one's intentions are also ethically important. Utilitarianism is distinctly different from other forms of consequentialism such as egoism, as it considers all interests equally. Proponents of utilitarianism have been split about whether individual acts should conform to utility, act utilitarianism, or whether agents should conform to ethical rules, rule utilitarianism. Utilitarians additionally remain split about whether utility should be calculated as an aggregate, total utilitarianism, or an average utilitarianism. Historically, hedonism can be traced back to Aristippus and Epicurus, who viewed happiness as the only good. Bentham is, however, credited with founding utilitarianism when he wrote an introduction to the principles of morals and legislation. Since Bentham, prominent utilitarians have included John Stuart Mill, Henry Sidgwick, R.M. Hare and Peter Singer. The philosophy has been applied to modern issues including the suffering of non-human animals. Specifically, utilitarianism has been applied to the ethics of raising animals for food. Opponents of utilitarianism have criticized it for many reasons. Some have said that utilitarianism ignores justice, while others contend that utilitarianism is impractical. Specific criticisms have included the mere addition paradox and the utility monster. Others have said that pleasure is not commensurable across people with varying identities, and thus the idea of aggregating utility is impossible. Benthamism, the utilitarian philosophy founded by Jeremy Bentham, was substantially modified by his successor John Stuart Mill, who popularized the word utilitarianism. In 1861, Mill acknowledged in a footnote that, though believing himself to be the first person who brought the word utilitarian into use, he did not invent it. Rather, he adopted it from a passing expression in John Galt's 1821 novel Annals of the Parish. Mill seems to have been unaware that Bentham had used the term utilitarian